morning. My name is Kira Loughran, and I'm the Associate Producer for the Forum here at Stratford, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you here today for our very first Forum event of the season in the Studio Theatre. It's Generations, and we're really, really pleased and honored to have with us a very special guest today, Helen Yermis. Helen is a survivor of the Stutthof concentration camp, and she's made it her life's work to share her experiences with young people and people around the world to ensure that they recognize the consequences of hatred and intolerance. She was born in Kovno, Lithuania in 1932, and she came to Canada in 1948. She has 3 children, 9 grandchildren, including Sarah Farb, and a great-grandchild. Sarah Farb is an actor in our Stratford company. It's her 3rd season at the festival, and she's playing Anne Frank in The Diary of Anne Frank, and Miss Constance Neville in She Stoops to Conquer, and Mary in The Last Wife. In her 1st season, she played Jessica in The Merchant of Venice, and she's been a member of the Birmingham Conservatory in 2013 and 2014. Her other roles include Cordelia in last year's production of King Lear and Cherry in The Beau Stratagem. Last year, she also wrote and starred in her one-woman play, Rebecca, or R-E-B-E-C-C-A, at Theatre Passe Muraille. And she's worked across the country in plays and musicals, earning critical praise, including the Mary Savage Award, a Calgary Theatre Critics Award, a Sterling Award, and Robert Merritt Award nomination. It's a really, really special event. This Sarah came to me last season when I was planning the forum and told me that her grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. And I thought it was really appropriate to the play, not only for the obvious reasons, but also with our production, the idea of carrying that story forward and inspiring the next generation of people at large to carry the impact of the Holocaust with us. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah for more further introductions, and thank you all again for coming.
Thanks, everybody. As Kira said, our production of Anne Frank is it's beautiful, but what's at the heart of it is the importance of perpetuating the story of the Holocaust and the atrocities caused, and how important it is as we move into a generation of people who, many of whom don't have a connection to a person like Baba Helen, which is, it's quite frightening to me to think that there are people who won't have met people like my grandmother. And so this is a really wonderful event adjacent to a production like ours. Basically, for my whole life, I've grown up knowing that Baba survived the Holocaust and various details of her story, but it was actually relatively recently that I was acquainted with the full scope of it, and I feel like maybe that was just because of a protective measure or whatever, but to know the depth of what you went through is really, it's astounding to be connected to somebody like you and what you've accomplished coming to Canada and establishing yourself and the family. And I feel so lucky to be a member of your family and a descendant.
We love to have you.
So Baba talks all the time to various groups, largely school children, and my mother is a high school teacher, and I got to sit in on, you did a talk at the library a couple of years ago, and the effect that you have on students is remarkable, and every time I see you, it seems like there's some token of gratitude or respect that a class has given to you, sort of just of their own accord, and of all different backgrounds. And it's just what you're doing is so important to me and the generation you've created, but also the one to come that don't know people like you. So, but I'll ask you some questions, but let's hear your story. But do you want to say anything first?
Before I say something, I'll say a few words.
Okay, please.
I'll begin. I don't want to. But my biography was. Oh, how about the microphone?
I'm just going to move this up.
Okay. Yes. Oh, I forgot about that.
Is that better now?
I'm not a professional. I want you to know. So. But I'm just touched by all of you, your presence here. To hear me is beyond. I'm short of. I can't express my gratitude for your being here, and I will say that again when I'm done. But I'm beginning with that too. The young lady who introduced me before. I told you that I was born in Lithuania, in the city of Kovno, or Kaunas in Lithuanian, which is, in my day, was the capital city of Lithuania. We were three of us for many years. My father was self-employed. And my mother was took care of me as I was an only child until I was 6 years old. And my father was the greatest influence on me, without any reservation. As I will tell you, and I can say it now, my education, my formal education is actually nil, or very close to it. The war broke out for us in 1941. Already the war was going on. Poland was already invaded by Germany. The Polish Jews were already feeling the brunt of what is to come. The Soviet Union and Hitler made up what they called a non-aggression pact, so that they won't interfere with each other, what they do with Europe. So they divided Europe between these two leaders. And but then Hitler decided not to keep his word, and he attacked the Soviet Union in 1941, June 22nd. That's when life started to change. Actually, I want to also stress one thing, that until then, I had a very normal childhood. I could go, I was always looking, I was 8 years old in 1941, but I was always doing things that are out of the ordinary, with friends, with little kids, but we felt very free, we felt very safe. We could go anywhere and do anything, and that was Lithuania in the 30s. I was born in 32. I can still remember that the Jewish community in Lithuania was autonomous, and Jewish children got their education. There were public schools that were taught in Yiddish and Hebrew. There was no payment for tuition, and I happened to go for 1 year to a school that my parents sent me, which was a girls' private school. And then the Russians came in 1940. That's when the pact came to be. It affected us as it affected the whole country. But as Jews, we were not affected yet. But the Russians were, they were the conquerors, and the Lithuanians were bitterly opposed to communism. And that's what really turned around when the war broke out finally in 1941. The Lithuanians were already ready for Hitler to do his bidding. And they were ready, they welcomed the Germans, the Nazis, the Germans, they welcomed them with open arms because they will not be under the communists. The communists, that was bad. Our city was bombed. I'll make it as briefly as I can. My father and mother packed up the kids. I had my little brother by then already. He was born in 1938. And something that they could carry. And like many of the Jewish population, and there were no vehicles of any kind, or horses and carriages and cars for sure not. By foot to go to save us to the Russian border. Well, if we cross the border, there we'll be safe. We never made it to the Russian border. The Germans were faster than we were, and they were in vehicles and making fun of us. And where do we think we're going? When we came back home, we were en route for 2-3 weeks. We were actually taken in by a Jewish farm family. The Jewish farmer, they took us in like we would be their relatives. But comes a time when we had to return back home. By the time we came home, there were already terrible things happening. There were all kinds of fukazis orders for us. The first thing was the yellow star, the gelle latte in Yiddish, if you know it. Front and back. No sidewalks. We were not allowed to register for school because that was June, July, August. School was coming, but we were not allowed to register for school anymore. The shopping was not for food. When everything was, and food was scarce to begin with. When it came for us to be allowed to buy food, there wasn't any. It was, the times were really, but we didn't know really what it would be like, we didn't know what to anticipate, how this will play out. The ghetto in Kovno was created, huge ghetto, huge. They brought in Jews from the small towns, from the surrounding areas, and they had to find accommodations, and there was also then the order that we have to go to this big field, which had a name. They called it the Democratic Square. Yes, yeah, very ironic, yes. And we were ordered to do that by 6 o'clock in the morning that day, the 28th of October, 1941. There was the stream of people going to that area, and that area is a very important place later on in my story, but I will get to it as soon as I can, really. I don't want to go over.
You're doing great for time.
Thank you, thank you. So when we came back, they already had killed numerous, there was a pogrom, and numerous people, Jews, children, it didn't matter. And this was done by the Lithuanians. This was not, the Germans were not even into this yet. And also, the city of Kovno, where we lived was called Slabotke. Slabotke was like a suburb, Thorn Hill, Slabotke. Here you had to cross a bridge to get into the city proper. We lived in the part of the suburb, and our home was part of the ghetto. We did not have to move. We were there, so we were lucky in this respect. Every day, the adults, my father and my mother and all the others, they were together. There was this, oh, I'm sorry, I got a little sidetracked. I want to go back to this, what it is called, the big action, and it's on the internet, and it came out that this here, what I'm about to say to you, was the first organized murder of Jews en masse, not grabbing and not killing and at a whim, but this was an organized. This was the first, and I was told that I have no idea. I don't do the computer. Yes. But I was told that this is the first organized slaughter. We gathered in that big field, and before we knew it, and we were to line up family for family. My mother had an elderly aunt. Now, my mother's elderly aunt, who was like a surrogate grandmother to me, I can assure you that I am much more elderly than she was, but I'm talking as a 9-year-old. I turned 9 in September, that September. So she was an elderly lady with ulcers from diabetes, and she could barely function and walk. They were not allowed, she had a daughter that was mentally challenged, so they were not allowed to be with us. We were our family, the four, and it was like there were turns and we were moving, and it took a whole day, but it didn't take long to find out that something very, very sinister is happening. And what it was, they took away about a third of the population of the ghetto. I don't really know the statistics exactly, but all I know that you could tell, first of all, there's a good side and there's a bad side. And my 9-year-old mind knew that we are on the good side. This time we're safe. When we came home, it was well after midnight, because this took a long process that we went through with the uniforms. There was a wall in my mind. There was a wall of green uniforms for Gestapo, with the swastikas, with the SS lightning, and with the caps, and nobody wanted to look at the faces. And I could never look at the face. We come home at night, we go to bed. Of course, my mother's aunt and her cousin never came back. I don't think they even made it to where to the graves that were waiting for them ready. Turned out, my neighbors, my mother's friends, my father's friends, used to change, a normal neighborhood with exchanging recipes and all kinds of stuff, and the kids, where we were friends, and you can fight and you can make up, and normal, yes. All these people that were surrounding me were gone. Only one person whom I knew at that time was a grandmother of some of the children with whom I played and fought and made up and all of this. Yes. Every day, everyone had to line up to go for slave labor. I was too young. So I was in charge of my little brother, whose name was Avremele, Little Abraham. And sadly, before I forget, because often I forget this, but after I die, there won't be anyone on this earth who ever knew him. My kids know that I had a little brother, but I'll get there soon. Yes. But there's no sign of that he ever existed. Every day, they went out to work, they came back, there was the gate, we lived near the gate, our home was near the gate, and we never knew whether the parents will return and find to us, or if the parents will come back and find us. This has been going on 41, 42, 43. I'm skipping a little bit. Comes the order that we have to move. The ghetto is, every time they took away people, the ghetto shrank. And what happened to the people that were taken away? I'm sorry, I have to retract a little bit. I'm not, the Tsar built forts for the First World War. And those forts, I don't know whether they were ever used in any way militarily or not, but I know that we kids, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, whatever, we used to play in those forts. And 2 of those forts, number 7 and number 9, became killing fields for the Lithuanians when the Germans first invaded. And also the 9th fort. Then the 9th fort became the killing field for Lithuanian Jews, and also from the Western Europe and from other places that were brought to this fort. And it's called the 9th fort. Now it's a museum. When the people who were marched up a hill, it was up in a hill, because the gravesites were waiting for them. As a matter of fact, I know of a young man who was left. He wasn't. They were shot sporadically, and there must have been 20,000 people. I have no idea. I don't know the statistics, but the ghetto shrunk at that time completely. And it kept on doing like this. So this young man, it made me think, my goodness, how many were buried that were still alive? Because this young man was he wasn't shot at all. And he was able to run away from that killing after they thought they were through, and we came back to the ghetto. As a matter of fact, I know the family now very well, and so can you imagine how many people that were left? He was left for dead too. So that was those were the circumstances that we lived under. And now came the order that we have to move. as I said, the ghetto was shrinking, and our turn came to move. When we had to find our own quarters. It wasn't like there were no ads. I'm being a little facetious, you know. Yeah. And we really had to fight for a roof over our heads. And we found a place, and I slightly retract, but this big field that was called the Democratic Square was a farm originally. The Russians were building their apartment buildings for the workers. Where we lived, there was no running water, there were outhouses, very primitive. They were installing, showers and the tubs, but it never materialized because the war broke out. So those buildings, the 3 buildings, very close by, were the big action when they took away so many to be killed at the 9th Fort. And we found quarters to share with another family, a larger room, the 4 of us, and I don't remember about it. I know that there were 2 adults. I don't recall any kids, but maybe their kids were working age. So, but we find this place. It's a setup for us. People lived in that place. So the way it was set up, it served us very well. It was like an L shape. And my father?
Sorry about it.
Sorry. There was an L shape, 2 sofas, one with the head to the wall and one with the side to the wall. And my mother and I shared one sofa, and my brother and my father shared the second sofa. That day, I cannot explain and it was against the law. You have to go to work. That was the rule. That was the order. My mother was home that day. That day I'm referring to was in 1944 March, late March. And as I said, my mother was home, my father was gone, and news traveled very quickly. And the news was that the ghetto is surrounded, and which is nothing unusual, but this time the objective is to take away children. The children, they are useless. What for? They surrounded the ghetto, and soon we hear in our building, it was an unfinished building, but it had steps to run out. It had several floors, no railing, but several floors. And also to enter to our room, there was a little entry hall that was open mostly, and it created a corner, sort of a triangular corner behind it. And we hear the crying already in our buildings, and mothers and children, and they're taken, and everything happens very fast. My mother doesn't. Here is my little brother, Avramale. He is 6 years old. Is our first concern. She pulls away the sofa that was with the head to the wall, puts him behind it, camouflages with pillows and blankets, whatever, and that is his hiding place. Now, this is the room. My mother and I don't communicate. I'm just standing. I don't know what to do. I'm a child. Something or somebody I can't explain. I was taken by hand. No. I cannot say that because it was not realistic. But literally, I heard a whisper in my ear, "Go behind the door, that triangular corner." And I did. And that's what I did. My mother it was not, I did it on my own. And it took 2 or 3 moments, and they run through they run up the steps, up, and they go around with the guns, and they're like this, pointing. And they see my mother, and they don't say anything. "Hey, what are you doing? Why aren't..." They just ignored her. They ran in the room. They ran out the room. They didn't look behind the sofa, and they didn't look behind the door. You're safe. Well, not quite. That night, my father, when he came home, he thought that he lost both his children, but it so happened that at that point, both children were safe. Somehow the adults knew that something is not, that something will continue. It's not over yet. And that's how we found out that there's the hiding place in our unfinished building, 2 walls, the wall and then a false wall, and with a trapdoor to crawl in. When this was done, or when this was, we don't know. I don't know that, but we were taken downstairs on the ground floor, and we were told to crawl in, which we did. There were other kids that were also saved the way we were somehow, and we were in the dark, and we didn't know what to expect. But surely, the following morning, we hear from outside noises, and the trap door is open, and it says, and somebody yells, and you heard Ukrainian, you heard German, you heard Lithuanian, you heard languages that everybody was participating in this task of taking away the children. We get out. This was an unfinished area. Our building was the least finished one. There was mud, and Lithuanian weather is similar to Canadian weather. And there was still snow and mud, but there were trucks. We were herded out. Rouse, get out. And we crawled out. We got outside. Trucks, soldiers with guns, dogs, and we are surrounded by all that. And we are told to get to the trucks. What happened to me, I can't explain. I was oblivious to the orders that we were given. There was a mother and an infant, and other kids. I can't even, but I have lost all, I can't recall more. I was there by myself with my brother. That's how it's in my brain. And I was standing, and he was with his back to me, and I was holding him with both my arms tight to me, like that. And I'm yelled at, "Let him go." and I am ignoring, I am not doing anything, I just am oblivious, as I said. This is the most, before I know it, there is this jump of one of those dogs. They were well trained, and with his teeth right into my wrist. For many years, I could tell where that was because the blood spurted out. I am covered with all kinds of stuff, of marks now with aging and all kinds of stuff. So I can't see. They grabbed him from me. They just plain grabbed him from me because I let him go with my arms. When the dog bit me, I let instinctively, I let go. And this is also a puzzle to me that they were able to take him at their whim at any time, including me. Could have taken both of us. The last thing I remember for that was my little brother, Avremele. He was dragged, actually. He was carried by two of their soldiers to the truck. And he was looking behind him to see if I'm following too. I wasn't following, I was just standing there. I have no recollection after the trucks took off. I have absolutely no recollection that I came upstairs to our quarters. I never, obviously I did, I came upstairs, but I don't recall this happening. I cannot explain this. My father came home that day, of course. He was already the lucky one, though, because one of his children is, because mostly they didn't ask you what age you are. They grabbed you and took you and grabbed you and took you, and that was part of their, they were just getting rid of Jewish children deliberately. That was March 1944. June or July, I think July perhaps, 44, the ghetto we were told that the ghetto is being liquidated. We will be evacuated. We ended up going by the trains, the cattle cars, whatever, all that, of course. Finally, the train stopped, and we got to get out. The stench and from all what was going on in the cattle cars, because there was a pail for human need, and there was no water, and of course no food, and people were just dropping. We were the lucky ones. The three of us were holding each other, and when we finally came to a stop, and they opened up the cattle cars, immediately they ordered the men to go on one side and the women on the other side. Now I am a woman. I'm 11 years old, but I'm a woman, because otherwise I would not be here today. Essentially, this is the part. There's much more than when we were brought to Stutthof, and people know Auschwitz has become and rightly so, because it was the biggest one. But it became the symbol of all the camps that were those death camps. And Stutthof is a very honorary place in Jerusalem, in the Yad Vashem museum, because a lot, it was one of those horror places with the ovens, with the gas chambers, with all the amenities. And we knew, in the ghettos, we knew that there are concentration camps where they use gas. And that's a fact. When we came to this concentration camp, group by group of us were taken in and naked and to undress, to take away all our belongings. And that is where, I don't always mention it, it is really, but my granddaughter thinks that it's very important, that I was keeping a diary. My father was very much, he kept a diary when he was younger. He let me read it, and he encouraged me to keep a diary, and I did. And I had the diary with me. I brought it to the concentration camp, but they took away everything, including the diary. Whatever happened to it, I have no idea. I survived. The diary didn't. And Anne Frank died. Her diary survived. It's, to me, I can't, when I first connected me to her like this, maybe it's beyond, maybe it's too much for, maybe I'm putting too much, but I did keep a diary, and on a daily basis, and what was going on each day, and what we are expecting, and what didn't materialize, and what did, and my little brother, and I quote him even in that diary, and he would say, when he was only 3 years old, when the Russians will come, they will be our liberators. You see, the Allies were too far away, so the Russians would have to be our liberators. And he knew that. He was a very clever little boy, but he was not unique. Children in the ghetto were like that because they knew that they knew what they have to face. My mother and I ended up in Stutthof. We were going to showers, we were told, and lo and behold, those were showers, because that was the shower heads and the way it looked. That was for sure a gas chamber. But we were given at that time our clothes. We never saw again our belongings. We were in pajamas, kind of stuff, like those striped pajamas with a number. What we are. My father never saw my father again. My mother and I ended up, as I said, in Stutthof. We went to sub camps. We lived in tents in the winter, and with no shoes and no clothing. And finally, on January 19th, we were told, they always announce today is this and this date, and those are the dates that are also in my head. We are not going to work anymore. We were doing the work. We were set up I'm trying to make it shorter, but we were 1,500 women at that time. We finished the task in one camp, and we were brought to the second one. The same setup, those tents, the very primitive tents, couldn't stand up. Bedding was straw, tent to a tent. And every morning we had our task of taking our tools and go to a certain place where we were digging those trenches and for the German military. They were losing the war, but they were busy with us. Anyway. My mother hears that we are going to and we're being evacuated, but there are no vehicles this time, no trains, no trucks, nothing. she asks the guard that is standing right beside us, we are lined up in 5 in a row, and she asks the guard, would it be okay if she goes to our tent to put in a little bit of the straw, which was full with all kinds of crawling things. Yeah. But we'll be outdoors. No shoes, no clothes. Yes, you can go to your tent. We went to our tent. My mother had a rope on her garb that I don't know what to call. Underneath nothing. She put in some straw for herself and some for me, I guess. And we come, and it takes 2 minutes, and we come back to join in because we knew we stay behind will die. There was no question. Anybody that could only crawl, not just walk, but crawl, would not stay behind. And this guard decided, no, you left the line, you are staying behind. That's it. You are not going anywhere. You're staying here. So we did. We stayed. And we were told to gather in a hut that was there to warm up and for a coffee or something. They had a chimney. And we were told to lie down. It was a circular kind of structure, veneer. And we were told, we turned out to be 52 women left behind. And who were left? Those who were dying. There was never a doctor. There was never any medicine. There was never a nurse. Nothing, absolutely. There was a place that people would go and to die a slow death. And it so happens that there was a mother and a daughter, like my mother and myself, the Rubins, Mrs. Rubin and her daughter Riva. And Riva was dying, and her mother stayed with a dying child. I always mention them because I don't know if there's anybody in their family that survived or whatever. I have no idea. So I make it, because Riva died just beside of me. But we were all injected that afternoon. We were injected. I was in the thigh, in the left thigh, some kind of a serum that we have no idea. The syringe there was only one syringe going from one to the other, and there are people with all kinds of ailments, who knows what. And we were told to lie, and that's how we listened. 3 days later, or 4 days later, a Russian scouting, a scouting group of several soldiers, Russian soldiers, discovered us and said to us, "Why are you here? You are free. We didn't even know. We were told to lie still, so we did. We were so well trained." The Russians liberated us. It was not, they transferred us to a place where we would be more comfortable. Yes, it was a former school, and there were cots there, but not for everybody. I was on the floor. This girl, Riva, was on the floor. We are just waiting. Nobody ever, the local population surrounding us, there was no way that they didn't know about us. And not only that, my mother and Mrs. Rubin, Riva's mother, were both going to beg for food. Sometimes they were chased away, and sometimes they were kind or gave us some. But Meanwhile, people were dying because they were dying regardless. And we still didn't get any nobody looked in on us. There was no medication, no anything, no doctor. So finally, after 2 months, we were like this. Meanwhile, Riva died. Her mother was walking to go to get food with my mother. She fell. She must have broken something, a hip or whatever, because she also died. Because there was no doctor to. After 2 months like that, we were brought to a hospital. The sisters, there were nuns. The sisters were very kind, and they treated us with great care and respect. And I don't recall getting clothes, but we probably got some clothes that they provided. And we were Russian citizens, so we were detained to be sent back to the Soviet Union, to Lithuania. We were able to escape. I know that I may have overstepped my.
Talk about how you met Zadie.
I beg your pardon?
How you met Zadie. How you met Zadie.
Oh well, that is how I met. Yeah, we ended up in Austria, and Germany and Austria both were divided in 4 sectors by the Allies: the Russian sector, the French, the American, and the British. We were not refugees, we were displaced persons. That's what we refer to. We didn't have where to go, we didn't know, nobody wanted us. But we ended up in Austria under the British. And my granddaughter wants me to tell you how I met my husband-to-be. I was 14 years old at that time. My husband's family was lucky because his father was a very, he was a hero in the sense he was so intent on getting away from the Germans. He said that if he would see a German, he would die. He took his oldest son, and Poland was sort of undivided. A part of that, or the Russians had, under the Russians. So he left his wife and the 3 younger kids, boys, and because they won't harm, the story was that they won't harm women and children. That was always that. The men, that's a different story. But my father-in-law was a very far. He was a human being with frailties like everybody else. But I think, I don't know if anybody else that did what he did, how he was able to organize a truck by the Russians. The men, I don't think, spoke Polish, never mind Russian. How he was able to organize this and came back for his family. And thus, they survived in Siberia and then in the Near East, the Russian republics. So my husband was, his story is a little bit different in the sense that their lives were safe, but his home was also broken and they lost a lot of stuff. Anyway, so we happened to meet at a conference. He was on the American zone and I was on the British zone, and I came to the American zone on false papers. I was 14 years old and I was dabbling in, I don't know what it was really, what they'd call it, politics? I don't know. Yes. But we met, we were together in it was a kind of a seminar. We got to know each other for 2 weeks, that's it. And the rest was a correspondence, and then we stopped writing, and then we got together. Yeah, we got together in 1951, and we married in 1952. And we have we have two daughters and a son. We have 9 plus, we have 10 grandchildren actually, because by marriage, my grandson Daniel is a daddy, and I used to be a good grandmother. Now I'm a great grandmother. And so, and my husband, who didn't know anything about business, his father was a tailor, became a very successful businessman in the grocery business. And not only that, he and one of his brothers started a business. There are 4 brothers. And the 4 brothers, the 2 brothers took in the other 2, and they became the Yermes brothers. But my husband Aaron, he would be here with me if he could. He suffered a stroke almost 12 years ago. If he could speak, he could run a business now, because his brain is, you talk to him and you can see that he's all here, amazing, but he cannot verbalize, and I have to guess what is. 63 years will be this July that we've been married.
But we have 2 photos. So first of all, I just want to talk about this one. You wanted to talk more about your father, so will you? This is the only picture we have that exists of him, right?
Yeah. That is the only of myself as a baby, right. and my mother.
Yeah.
And how did the picture get here? My mother sent the photograph to my mother's family. She was the eldest. My grandfather became a widower when my mother's when his wife, my grandmother, passed away at the ripe old age of 33 and left him with 3 little girls. My mother having been the eldest.
Baba Toby, by the way,
8.
came to Canada with you.
Pardon?
Baba Toby came to Canada.
Yes, she came with me. But her family, my grandfather remarried and had a second family, but my mother's younger sisters were also, my mother was the only one who did not go to Canada. She stayed behind. I think my father was already in the picture in 1924. So I acquired, so this is, my mother sent photographs, and this photograph is of my father, myself, and my mother. I don't know how you can see it or not, but it's...
He's handsome.
But I was, yes.
And you're super cute.
Thank you. Yes.
And now this is sort of more of a story, this photo.
Yeah, well, yeah, this photograph it's got a story. It speaks for itself. This is a photograph that is amazing because it was taken in the ghetto. And I did not...
I'll just like...
Yes.
Like,
it was taken in the ghetto, and I had a pretty good mind, even though my education was lacking very much so.
Maybe I'll put it over here.
I knew certain terms, and when I was told, would I mind being photographed for archives? And I knew what archives were. And I said, yes, go ahead. Yeah, you can. My biggest regret was that I didn't have my brother with me, because he would have been in this photograph with me. This photograph was like it was taken, and then what photograph? When photograph? Who? Where? Nobody thought of any photograph. There is a Holocaust museum in Washington, and I get a call somebody gave them my name, that I survived the Kovno Ghetto, and I can give them, perhaps I can give them information. So this gentleman from Washington on the telephone phones me, Mr. Rose, Paul Rose, and he explains himself, and I agree, but it wasn't convenient when he phoned, but if he'll call me back a couple of days later, I'll be glad to talk to you. He said he wanted to talk to me about 15, 20 minutes to fill him in on some things. And it became an interview of almost 3 hours or so, something like that. So, and he did compliment me on my memory, and that was in the middle 90s. So I was a little bit younger, but still not so young anymore. Yes. So I say to him, Mr. Rose, I don't know how to put it, I don't know how to say it, but I'm told I was getting messages from people, family, friends, and people, very casual acquaintances. They saw me. They went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. It had just opened months ago, and each community that especially that was decimated has a corner in this museum, including the Kovno Ghetto. My husband's brother and his wife and a couple of friends went to that museum, and they know that I'm from Lithuania, from Kovno. That much they know. They didn't know me as a kid. They didn't know me as anything. They knew me when I was getting married. So I tell him things, and he's very impressed and gives me compliments he needed confirmation. They had the information, but he needed confirmation of what really, truly, historically, what happened. And when I told him what I knew, what I went through, he was amazed, and he told me so. And so I said, Mr. Rose, I have a favor to ask you. I'm told that my picture is a picture of me, and I didn't even make the connection with that picture. But there's a picture of me in the museum. I can't tell you what I looked like. I can't remember. I don't know what I wore, and nothing. It is. I'll see what I can do. That was his answer, and we said goodbye to each other, and that was it. Several weeks later, he phones, and he asks me leading questions. Was I in a group, or was I alone, and other things? And the people who saw my photograph saw it like this. This is full length. They saw it half. Nobody could tip me off that I'm holding something in my hands. And I didn't remember whether I was holding something in my hand or not. But he asked me, did you hold something in your hands? And when he asked me this question, perhaps it's the same voice that got to me when I put myself behind the door. I heard that whisper in my ear, a milk can. And he told me, I found it. So that, and he sent me a copy, and it's been
Circulated.
Oh, it's been circulated a lot, all over. Yes.
I went to that museum, and there's I don't know, it must still exist. It's a slideshow of the different ghettos, and my mom and I stood in front and watched the Kovno Ghetto slideshow, and we saw this picture of you, and we stood and waited for it to come around, and there was this other group waiting for a picture to come around, and yours came up, and they said, "Oh, there she is," and just sort of, it was just because you look so much like somebody that they knew, but we got to tell them that this is...
when you were in the museum.
Yeah.
But something just went into my head and it flitted out. That's bad. That's...
Okay, I have questions, but I feel like I can just ask them on my own time. There's one, though, that I did want to ask. The company of Anne Frank was visited by a man who survived by hiding in Amsterdam. And one of the things he said that has stuck with many of us was that he fundamentally believes now that people are not truly good at heart, which is something that Anne Frank is very famous for saying the opposite of. And given your experience, and nobody could hold you to any statement, any feeling, but what is your reaction to something like that? Somebody who also experienced such hate and horror. You've always been such an accepting and wonderful person, so. But I'm just curious what your reaction is to a statement like that.
What can I say to that? That was a tough time that we went through, no question about it. That I am lucky to be here, that was no question about it. I truly believed that when I was very young, and I suppose naive, very naive actually, to believe that after what transpired with the concentration camps, with the ghettos, with the death camps, with all the horrors, that all this, it will never. The Jewish people from now on will be treated with respect that they're due. We are all different. We all have good people and not such good people and not very, all. That's how it goes. We are all a mix. But I know that we're chosen, or whatever reason that is. I'm scared now. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Sure.
The situation that is going around on the internet, and there was how Jews are being belittled, and makes it. It's reminiscent. I remember I was born in '32, so I was only 8 years old, but I remember how the climate, political climate, how it changed, and we were at risk. We didn't realize that how much, and I'm scared that forbid that this shouldn't happen again.
I think there's time for a few questions. Does anyone want to? Oh, okay. Well, you can. Yeah, we'll ask you next. Thank you.
When you told your story about how you met your husband, was he the boy with his father, and they got the truck and came back?
No,
he was
not.
one with the mother.
He is number 3.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
In our Detroit area Holocaust Museum, the recording, people like you, have you been extensively recorded?
I'm sorry.
Were you recorded telling your story?
You should be extensively recorded.
Well, I did several documentaries, but also Steven Spielberg, as his project was phenomenal. And yes, I participated in that.
Can you just tell us about what that was? It was at the time when he was putting out Schindler's List?
Was it? I don't.
I think so.
I don't know the.
Was it? I think so.
You see, you got me there. That's a very excellent point.
Anyway,
But
he
yes.
documented a
He
lot of
documented,
survivors.
yes. Unfortunately, not everybody was ready to talk like I
Right.
am. I know people who are dead, and it was really, they went through, oh my God, but they just couldn't bring themselves to talk about it.
Over here?
You mentioned that you didn't have any formal education. You have such a phenomenal command of the English language with such phenomenal mastery of English grammar. Did you manage, yes, did you manage to have any education as an adult?
You might think yes, but not really.
You just read a lot.
Yes, in the ghetto, I was an avid reader. My father taught me to read when I was 4 years old, and I was never without a book.
Thank you.
And yes, and I read all kinds of classics. Children, I mean, some things that were not for children, but it didn't harm me at all.
Shira, there's one.
Thank you.
When you went to the concentration camp, did you receive a prisoner tattoo?
No, that was only, as far as I know it, this is Auschwitz. The death camp, Auschwitz, had the tattooed numbers. We had numbers on the uniforms that they were giving us while we were in the camp. Afterwards, when we were taken out to go to those digging the ditches, the trenches, whatever they called it, they gave us schmattes. I don't know if you know.
Like rags.
Rags, absolutely rags. So to pick out for our, they took away the uniforms, but we did have a number, a red strip across. There was a yellow star front and back, and there was a red stripe across the chest here with the number of the inmate. That was the yes. But no tattoos.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Helen, for sharing your story, and Sarah for bringing her here and prompting her. So it's really wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What a fantastic way to start our forum here this season. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you
if you're
for
interested,
honoring me, please. Thank you for being here. Thank you. You're all in my heart. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm overwhelmed in the best sense, in the best way. Wow. You're glad to see you.
If you're interested in attending more events, we do have these calendars available in the lobbies of all of our theaters that have day-to-day events for the forum. It's also available on our website at stratfordfestival.ca/forum. Next week at the same time here, Anne-Marie McDonald is part of a panel with Deborah Hay, Scott Wentworth, discussing Pericles with scholar Philippa Shepherd about our production of Pericles this year. And there's a free event also related to Anne Frank on Friday, where some of the children in our company are going to be reading excerpts from her diary, sharing their own, and discussing the story of Anne Frank's story in relation to their own lives. That's in the Chalmers Lounge on Friday at 5:30. And on Sunday, there's an event with Deborah Hay and a scholar, Paul Yakinen, who's talking about the taming of the shrew, changing Kate and her conversion within the play. That's Sunday here at 10 o'clock or 10:30. Check your calendar. Thanks again for coming, and have a wonderful visit while you're here with us.
While the workmen are in the building from 8 to 6, we must be completely quiet. Move only when absolutely necessary. We can't go outside. We can't even look out the window. But after 6, we can talk, laugh, play games, move around just as we would at home.
Unless you write yourself, you can't know how wonderful it is. Maybe one day I could even publish a novel based on my diary. I want to go on living even after my death.